Behind the walls, the beasts rattled their cages. Every cadet's voice made them answer. A tusked roar earned a crash of claws against steel. A scaled shriek was met with a chorus of snarls. The louder the command, the harder the monsters struck the barriers, as if the creatures themselves were judging who was fit to command them. The instructor's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Power is voice. It must carry dominance. It must bend beasts as easily as it bends soldiers. Weak voices mean weak leaders. Weak leaders die. One by one, cadets stepped forward. They bellowed until the floor vibrated, screamed until consoles cracked, howled until the cages rattled like drums. Each display drew approving nods. At the end of the line, one figure waited, the human. He had no horns, no tusks, no resonator plates to magnify his voice. His throat wasn't built to roar. His lungs weren't bred for thunder. While the beasts thundered and the cadets jeered, he stood with his hands folded, soft-skinned, silent. When his name was called, he walked forward. Calm. Unarmored. Prey among predators. Your turn, the instructor said. The human drew a breath and spoke. Not loud, not commanding. Just one word, quiet, steady, almost gentle. The hall exploded with laughter. Is that a whisper? One cadet barked. Pathetic, another sneered. Even hatchlings scream louder than that. The datapad blinked red. Failure. But in the cages behind the walls, the beasts had gone utterly still. No rattling, no growling, no snapping of jaws. Their massive heads had turned, ears pricked, as if the whisper had carried something none of the predators could name. Ethan Cole stood with his heart beating hard beneath his ribs. He tried to steady his breathing. He could feel his scalp tingling, where eyes fixed on him, mockery in their glare. Scores of alien cadets surrounded him. Javor, with tusks like curved blades. Trellin, whose singing shriek could shatter glass. Sava, whose throat had been modified with bone resonators to amplify every roar. They measured worth by loudness. Every culture in the academy insisted voice was the measure of power. Days before the trial, instructors drilled voice projection. They strapped cadets into reverberation chambers. Walls pulsated, pupils sweated, as they had to shout through acoustic filters that doubled their volume. Voice cracks were common. Several cadets woke with raw throats. They coughed nights filled with rasping wheezes. Medical staff patched them with saline gargles and vocal rest. Some had micro-tears in their vocal folds, verified by laryngoscope. Those would take at least 7 days of total silence or whisper mode to heal. Ethan had watched them all. Sore throats, swollen uvulas, bleeding from overstrain, lips cracked from shouting until hours after dawn. He never raised his own voice except in drills when required. In exercises, he spoke quietly. His voice never broke. It never cracked. He avoided overuse. He warmed up with humming in the morning and evening. He kept vocal hydration water chilled, but not cold, lozenges free of harsh menthols. The academy halls were thick with expectation that dominance equaled volume. Every general who visited measured cadet worth by decibels. Charts on the walls tracked voice volume across weeks. Ones who could sustain blasts of sonic intensity for 60 seconds received praise, failures stamped as weak. In class lectures, they illustrated with holographs the waveforms of voices. Alien voices showed spires and peaks. Ethan's graphs were flat lines with small undulations barely visible. The cadets laughed when the instructor displayed his waveform next to a tray lens. One morning, Ethan felt a tightness in his throat. He noticed when he spoke to his roommate, Milo Clark, that his voice felt thin. He had pushed too long in yesterday's projection drills. The next day, his throat felt raw. On inspection in the medical bay, they found swelling of the vocal folds, mild erythema, but no nodules yet. The doctor told him, at least 5 days of strict voice rest, then gentle phonation only. Ethan obeyed. He whispered to Milo, drank warm broths, avoided cold air and caffeine. Milo said, "You should yell, you should roar, that's what they respect here." Ethan nodded, but did not respond in volume. He believed there was strength even in quiet. Weeks of mockery had built a weight over Ethan's shoulders. Every instructor's glare, every cadet's snort cut more than physical strain. He learned to read tone and timing, to observe reaction. He knew how beasts shivered before certain commands, even those barely audible, from cadets who had trained for tremolo, staccato harshness. Then the announcement came. The trial of command. Instructors gathered cadets in the central hall. The arena gates would open 9 hours after dawn. Each cadet would command the war beasts, order them to obey, to kneel, to submit. The beasts bred for one purpose: to ignore fear, ignore pain, ignore submission. Previous generations had failed. Nobles had died. Generals had walked away maimed. Ethan was assigned last in line, the instructor said, so everyone can see contrast. The cadets murmured. Trellin lashed her tail, Sava cracked knuckles, Javor grinned wide. All expected Ethan to fail spectacularly. Some bet he would be torn apart before he spoke. That night, Ethan lay in his bunk in the barracks, his throat still sore, healing but fragile. He practiced in silence, lip trills, humming, gentle vowels. He slept with humidifier running. His sleep was restless, dreams haunted by roars and clawed beasts. Morning came, the sky pale. Ethan ate a thin porridge. He felt hunger. He managed light tea with honey. Medical staff had cleared him to speak softly, no yelling, no strain. He felt the scar tissue under his folds still tender when he swallowed. He donned his uniform. The aliens wore armor that amplified their voices via resonators built into their chests, horns built for echo. Ethan wore only regulation gear, no enhancements. He walked to the trial arena. The gates loomed, the sand ringed with stone seats. Thousands present, cadets, instructors, nobles, even the emperor's observers. Beasts in cages behind metal grates, glowing eyes peering. The gates opened with a rumble. Beasts stepped out, plated hides, iridescent scales, sinew glistening under the sun, jaws strong enough to shear steel bars, claws that could gouge stone. They stalked the ring's edge. The alien cadets leaped forward first. Javor roared, Knel. Trellin screamed, Obey. Their voices amplified by resonators until the sound cracked the air. But beasts snarled. They snarled instead of kneeling. They charged. One cadet, small and proud, misjudged distance. A beast bit his leg. He screamed. He was dragged back, blood arced. The medics ran in. The cadet's femoral artery was nicked. They applied pressure, packed the wound, gave analgesic, transported him for surgery. That cadet would spend 6 weeks in recovery, walking with a cane, months before full strength returned. Meanwhile, others shouted until throats bled, until tongues rasped, until their mouths tasted of copper and spit. Nothing worked. The beasts ignored them. Then the mocking chorus turned to whispers. What hope for the human last in line, they asked. Surely death by silence. Ethan waited. His heart felt hollow with fear, but steady. He had no resonators. He would not yell. He stood calm. He exhaled slowly. His throat hurt, but he held himself upright. The arena trembled under the beast's march. Sand kicked. The shadows of armored cadets eclipsed him. Then, instructor called, Ethan Cole, step forward. He nodded. The audience held breath. He spoke his word, not loud, not commanding, just one word, quiet, steady, almost gentle. Silence shattered. For a moment, nothing moved. The word Ethan spoke had no force behind it. It floated into the arena like dust in a shaft of light, barely there, entirely ignorable. No roar followed, no crack of dominance, just a word, a whisper. But the war beast stopped. Mid-charge, muscles bunched and jaws yawning, their massive bodies froze. One blinked. Another tilted its head. Then, one by one, as if an invisible hand pressed them downward, they began to lower. A plated beast, the size of a hover skiff, folded to its haunches. Another followed, then another. Within seconds, 7 war beasts engineered to ignore fear, pain, fire. Command sat in the sand like obedient hounds. Not cowed, not defeated, attentive, their eyes fixed on Ethan. Gasps rippled through the arena. The instructor stared, lips parted but speechless. The datapads tracking command response flickered, then stalled. Red bars vanished, Graphs went flat. The monitors didn't show compliance or resistance. They blinked a single word: recognition. Ethan said nothing else. His hands were at his sides, his face unreadable. He took one step forward. The beasts didn't flinch. Their breathing was slow, controlled. From the stands, a high-pitched voice whispered. They bowed. Another followed. That's not submission, that's choice. The crowd did not erupt. It couldn't. The quiet was heavier than any roar. Javor stood with his fists clenched, his throat bruised purple from screaming minutes earlier. Trickery, he growled. No beast yields to whispers. Instructor, Trellin snapped, her voice hoarse. He used tech. He has to have a stim modulator. There is no modulator, the instructor said, voice thin now. We scanned, nothing. No implants, no enhancers, nothing artificial. His eyes never left Ethan. He just spoke. The beasts had not moved since. One flicked an ear. Another shifted its weight, but they remained seated, calm. A handler approached to return them to their cages. The nearest beast growled once. The handler froze. Ethan spoke again. Quiet. Stay. The handler backed off. The beast stilled. Medical personnel took longer with the injured cadet. Reports confirmed a punctured femoral artery, significant blood loss, soft tissue damage. He would survive, but he would be off training rotations for at least 8 weeks. The medics were cautious. They applied direct pressure, administered clotting agents, and packed the wound in layers. The trauma required 2 surgeries. Nothing about it was brushed aside. Ethan watched from the edge of the arena as the medics worked. He didn't look proud. He didn't look shaken. He looked tired. The instructor approached him slowly. What did you do? Ethan's answer was a quiet one. I asked. The instructor's ridged brow creased. Asked? Ethan nodded. Not demanded, not threatened. Just asked. The instructor stared at him, but before more questions could come, the lead handler tried again to retrieve the beasts, this time with a full team. They used magnetic collars, shock poles. As they neared, the beasts bristled, not violently, but in silent resistance. Their eyes flicked to Ethan. When he didn't speak, the beasts rose, not in aggression, in waiting. He gave another word. Return. And they went. Not dragged, not driven. They turned, one by one, and walked calmly back into their cages. No need for shocks, no barking orders, just obedience. That evening, the academy buzzed, not with noise, but with something worse. Uncertainty. Ethan returned to the barracks under silent watch. Some cadets stepped aside without meeting his eyes. Others stared openly, unsure if they should mock him or kneel. He ignored them. His throat still ached from the strain of the morning. Though he hadn't spoken loud, the stress was there. Quiet tension can damage as surely as shouting. He drank warm fluids, herbal tea with manuka extract, took his prescribed anti-inflammatories, avoided citrus, which dried the throat. The academy's medics insisted he rest for 48 hours. He followed every instruction. Recovery mattered. That night, he received a summons. The academy's high chamber was rarely used. Only once in Ethan's time had he seen it occupied when a galactic warden visited to observe predator training. Now the chamber doors opened, and Ethan entered alone. Seated at the crescent dais were 12 figures, one from each species enrolled in the academy. Their faces impassive, behind them shimmering banners. In the center, a visitor in silver robes, embroidered with the imperial sunburst. The envoy of the Emperor. You are Ethan Cole, the envoy said, more a statement than a question. Ethan nodded once. We have reviewed footage. You use no device, no trick, and yet the war beasts obeyed you. Ethan said, Yes. Explain. I can't. Can't or won't. Ethan thought a moment. What do you want me to say? The envoy gestured to the council. You were not born among predators. You have no voice of thunder. And yet, you held dominion where others failed. Even emperors have not achieved what you did today. Ethan's jaw tensed. I didn't hold dominion. I didn't control them. Then, what did you do? I saw them. Silence. I watched how they moved, how they reacted to each voice. I learned how sound changed them, how stress changed them. I studied their eyes, their gait, their breath rate. I didn't need to overpower them, I just needed to speak in a way they understood. The envoy sat back. Impossible. Not impossible, Ethan said, just not loud. The next morning, the handlers returned to the cages to feed the beasts. They had eaten, but their behavior had changed. They were calmer. They responded to basic cues without resistance. When one cadet shouted, the beast ignored him. When Ethan walked past the outer gate, the beast turned to watch him. Quiet. Still. One handler reached out with a calming stim. The beast flicked its tail once, annoyed. Ethan, seeing the moment from across the training yard, raised a hand and said gently, "Easy." And the beast relaxed. The handlers stared. "Commander," one said to the chief instructor. "They're listening, but only to him." By midday, the news had spread across the planetary network. Footage of the trial played in loops. Every military institute, every predator culture that once scoffed at humans, watched in stillness as beasts lowered their heads to a voice not raised. Diplomatic channels lit up, messages from homeworlds, questions, demands, and whispers, always whispers. What is it buried in the human voice that even monsters recognize? The question spread like static through the halls, the mess, the chambers. The idea took root. Not fear, not respect, something older. In the week that followed, Ethan was assigned observation only. The medics enforced it strictly. They monitored his vocal recovery, measuring swelling with regular laryngeal scans. No strain. Full vocal rest outside of basic need. Compliance was high. Human vocal cords, unlike predator structures, did not regenerate quickly. Damage could become chronic. By the third day, Ethan had regained light speaking ability, not full strength. Still, the handlers asked him to stand outside the cages again. The beasts came to the gate. They didn't growl, they didn't charge. They waited. Ethan placed a hand to the bars. "Hello," he said. 8 beasts sat down. The datapads blinked again. Not command accepted. Just recognition. 4 days later, Ethan stood on the arena floor again, but not for a test. This time, it was a demonstration. The High Command had arrived in full. Diplomats, sector warlords, empire-born nobles, and science officers in polished uniforms. Behind thick, transparent shielding, they watched from observation tiers above the sand. The war beasts waited behind heavy gates, calm but alert, their cage walls scarred from decades of failed control attempts. Ethan stood alone. No armor, no amplification. The only sound in the vast arena was the faint hum of energy barriers and the low breath of predators just out of sight. A speaker's voice echoed overhead. "This is a Class 12 war beast trial. All observers will remain in protected zones until cleared." The side gate opened. 8 beasts emerged, muscle and scale, tusks and plated hides. Each one weighed more than a military hover tank. Eyes burned orange, breath steamed the air. The crowd tensed. In the observation tier, a general tapped his datapad, triggering decibel sensors. The readings began baseline. Silence. Ethan waited, feet firm in the sand, no theatrics, no stance of power. He simply stood and watched them come. The beasts stopped 3 meters from him. One snorted, another scratched the earth with a foreclaw. The largest, a striped brute with overlapping jaw plates, stared directly at Ethan's chest. Then Ethan spoke. "Sit!" The word carried no force. It was spoken like a suggestion, maybe even a greeting. But to the beasts, it was command. No hesitation, no confusion. They sat. Gasps from the tiers. The sound of shifting bodies, shocked murmurs. Several high-ranking instructors leaned forward at once. They checked their monitors again. Still no command received. Instead, recognition. The beasts did not fidget. They didn't scan for weakness. They waited. Some blinked slowly. One yawned. Ethan looked up toward the observation glass. "Is there anything else?" The envoy stepped forward. "Ask them to move." Ethan turned slightly. His voice stayed level. "Walk." The beasts rose. Without aggression, they began to pace the perimeter, each step measured, avoiding Ethan's path. Dust curled around their feet. When he said stop, they halted, forming a wide circle around him. The image was undeniable. 1 human, 8 war beasts, calm, obedient. The envoy raised his voice. Can anyone else replicate this? No answer. The science officer stepped forward next. Has he been tested for vocal modifications? Twice, the instructor replied. No implants, no chemicals, no acoustic enhancers. He's just human. One noble scoffed. Nonsense. There must be some code word, some frequency. But even they sounded uncertain. Ethan spoke again. Return. And the beasts did. No resistance. They turned and walked back through the gate, one pausing to nuzzle his arm before it left. That evening, the academy was quieter than it had ever been. Cadets murmured in corners, but no one raised their voice. The sound of laughter was gone. The echo of shouting drills was absent. Only the low hum of systems filled the air. Ethan sat alone in the medbay, a patch pressed gently to the side of his neck. The academy's chief medical officer, Dr. Havel, scanned his throat with a portable laryngoscope. Your cords are healing well. Still signs of inflammation. I'd advise another 3 days of limited use. You're lucky. If you'd strained harder in that first trial, we might be looking at scar tissue. Ethan nodded. His voice rasped faintly. I'm being careful. I've seen screamers destroy their voice boxes in a week here, Havel muttered. But yours? It's different. There's no trauma. Just resonance. Is that a diagnosis? It's a mystery, Havel said, but a quiet one. He handed Ethan a vocal recovery kit, hydration sachets, lozenges, a strict phonation log. Track your usage. I want hourly readings until full recovery. Ethan accepted it. Thank you. Just don't do anything reckless. You're not invincible. Even quiet power wears out if you push too far. But the academy was already pushing further. The day after the demonstration, 3 instructors from off-world predator academies arrived for observation. Then came a genetics team, authorized by Imperial Seal, to test the beasts. They ran neural scans, muscle reflex trials, even chemical scent mapping. The beast's brains showed no unusual activity, no dopaminergic spikes during Ethan's command, no altered fight-or-flight responses. But there was one anomaly. Their baseline stress levels dropped significantly in his presence. One scientist wrote in the log, no sign of hormonal suppression. Recognition appears behavioral, not biochemical, yet consistent. Total compliance. Still, no one could explain it. Milo Clark returned from injury rotation and found Ethan seated alone in the mess. The other cadets gave him wide berth, not out of fear, out of something else. Reverence, maybe. Confusion. Milo dropped his tray beside him. So, you're famous. Ethan gave a tired half-smile. I didn't mean to be. They're saying your voice has pre-civil contact tones. I read that. Milo leaned in. Is it true? I don't even know what that means. They sat in silence for a while. Then Milo asked, Do you think it'll happen again? Next trial? Ethan looked down at his tea. I don't know. I'm not controlling them. I think they're choosing. To obey? No, Ethan's eyes were distant. To listen. The academy scheduled a final test, a controlled experiment, this time in a sealed chamber, isolated, no possible tricks. One beast, one command. Ethan stepped into the test cell, no observers except a few officers behind shatterproof glass. The beast was agitated, unfed, partially sedated. Its breathing was fast, heart rate elevated. It paced in circles, claws carving grooves into the reinforced floor. Ethan said nothing at first. He stood quietly, hands loose. Then he said, Easy. The beast stopped. Just stopped. It stood there, breathing slowed, muscles relaxed. Ethan waited. Then, Come. It walked to him, slow, intentional. It lowered its head, massive nostrils flaring inches from Ethan's chest. He placed a hand on its snout. No sensors triggered, no alarms, no aggression. Just a pulse, slow and steady. The officers reviewed the footage again and again. In the final report, one notation stood out. Behavioral compliance achieved without enforcement. Vocal amplitude below measurable threshold. Command response absent, replaced by what can only be termed recognition. Subject does not dominate. Subject invites. And the beasts listen. They called it the echo. Not Ethan's voice itself, but the effect subtle, strange, and silent that followed whenever he spoke near the beasts. Within 10 days, it had been documented 53 times. No matter the environment, no matter the species of war beast. No matter the state agitated, starving, wounded, disoriented, they responded to him. Not to his tone, not to his posture, just to him. And still, the Academy couldn't explain it. The beast trainers, the linguists, the acoustic engineers, all of them combed through every spectrogram, every high-fidelity capture of Ethan's whisper. They found no subharmonics, no infrasonic codes, no embedded frequencies. His voice wasn't louder, smarter, or more complex. It was just his. And it worked. Even on the untamables. The final test wasn't announced. They didn't tell Ethan. They didn't give him a chance to prepare. At 0400, instructors entered his dorm, woke him, and handed him a clean uniform. No gear, no briefing, just follow. His throat was better almost fully healed, but the med team had warned him about overuse. Recovery was steady, but not invulnerable. One harsh trial could undo all the progress. He said nothing as they escorted him. Down past the arenas, through locked corridors, into the sublevels beneath the academy where students weren't allowed. It smelled like disinfectant and metal. Lights flickered faintly overhead as they stopped outside a triple-sealed containment door. The lead handler looked nervous. She double-checked the magnetic seal herself. This one's not like the others. Ethan glanced at the warning sign. Red letters burned across a steel plate. Experimental subject 0-9. Do not engage. Full kill authorization active. Inside was a beast unlike any he'd seen before. Not larger, not fiercer, just wrong. Its limbs bent oddly, its skin shimmered without light. It hadn't been bred for battle like the others. This one had been built a prototype war intelligence unit, rejected after killing 3 handlers on instinct. It didn't charge, it didn't roar. It simply watched. And when Ethan stepped in, the air changed, thickened, like gravity had found something new to pull on. He stood still. The beast paced once, then stopped in front of him, its head tilted, as if evaluating not his size, but his presence. He took a breath. "Hello," he said, soft but audible. No response, no reaction. Then he said, "I see you." The beast shuddered. Its body trembled not with fear, but awareness. Ethan lowered his head slightly. "Do you want to be seen?" Seconds passed. Then it sat. Not aggressively, not obediently. Deliberately. Outside the glass, officers leapt from their seats. A siren blared once, then cut off mid-wail. Monitors didn't flash recognition this time. They went blank. One line of text replaced all telemetry. Waiting. After they released him, Ethan was brought before the Academy's highest tribunal. Not to reprimand him, not to test him. To ask. What was his voice? What command had he given? And his answer remained the same. "I didn't command. I spoke." "But why do they listen?" one noble demanded, even when others screamed themselves hoarse. Ethan looked down at the table between them. "I don't know. Maybe they hear something we don't. Or maybe they're tired of being shouted at." That day, he was offered 3 positions: an instructor's role at the academy, a research post with the Empire's Neural Behavior Division, or a field commission, an operational post in wild zones where war beasts were used. He declined all of them. Instead, he requested something simple: observation rights. "Let me work with them. Not in tests, in calm. I don't want to control them. I want to understand." It was an unusual request. They granted it. Reluctantly. Over the next 6 months, Ethan was allowed into containment zones others couldn't enter. His presence alone made feeding easier, medical checks safer, and stress levels drop. Even volatile breeds began responding to verbal guidance only his. He still spoke quietly. Always quietly. His voice remained unimpressive by acoustic standards. The highest reading ever recorded from him was barely above a whisper. And yet, it changed everything. Other cadets began to try. They watched him, tried to imitate his methods. But no matter how closely they mimicked his words, the beasts ignored them. Something about Ethan couldn't be replicated. They called it the quiet alpha effect. But Ethan hated the term. "I'm not above them," he once told Milo. "They just trust me." "You think trust is that simple?" Milo asked. Ethan only smiled. For them, maybe at Island. One evening, just before the Academy's seasonal close, Ethan visited the central enclosure, his favorite. It was just one beast inside, the first one he'd ever spoken to, now older, still formidable. It approached slowly and sat beside him as he stood by the gate. He spoke softly. "Tired?" The beast huffed once. "Me too." They watched the horizon together, two figures, so different in form, but somehow aligned in stillness. And, in that silence, Ethan felt it again. Not power. Not control. Just connection. Unspoken, ancient, and unmeasurable. The next morning, the Academy's central speaker system broadcast a quiet announcement. Cadet Ethan Cole transferred to Research Unit. Cross-species behavioral ethology. Beast training program suspended until further notice. No explanation. No replacement. Just a quiet end to a louder age. And as he left, walking out past the gates with only a satchel and a notebook, he paused once. He turned toward the cages, where 8 sets of eyes followed him through the bars. He raised his hand. "Goodbye," he said. And in perfect silence, they bowed.